Can you talk about why an implementation is so important in sort of the customer relationship, and maybe like what goes into setting up a proper implementation? Like in your perfect state, sort of what are you moving towards when it comes to implementation and onboarding new customers?
Yeah. The first few months, and again, I'll preface by saying I'm talking primarily about products that suit mid-market and enterprise, so you have longer kind of learning curves within them. But those first few months are so, so critical to setting the foundation for the rest of the partnership. One, because you have that real incentive, right? They've just signed up, they're excited, there's a reason that they've bought your product. So you want to capitalize on that excitement and that willingness to engage. And the second is that they have they have to learn how to use your product in order to adopt it in the way that you can then showcase value. So really, the implementation is all about adoption and engagement. And typically, a team who is sort of focused and specialized in how to get the most out of the customer is kind of the right approach. So, actually, at Iterable, we had forced attach for implementation packages. So, we actually didn't let a customer sign up for our platform without purchasing an implementation package because it was such an important part of the customer journey.
And what does implementation look like? I'm always curious about the difference of like how much homework are you giving to the admins to set things up? Do you schedule calls? Like, do you
Yeah.
anchor around a launch timeline? Like, how do you sort of think about making sure, okay, they actually get the job done? Because I mean, we have this issue at Doc at times where it's like someone buys it and then it's like, all right, like let's get going. Like you got to do a little bit work. We'll help you, but you got to do some stuff. Like, how do you think about that sort of push and pull of like the work on the CSM or onboarding side versus like the customer side?
Yeah, so there's two approaches that you can take. One is that you, as the provider, will do all of the heavy lifting and you'll configure the product for the customer. The other option is that you, as the provider, play much more of a consultative role. So the customer has to do the heavy lifting, the kind of configuration integration work, but you're there every step of the way telling them, okay, now you do this, and here's what we recommend with that. And this is the right documentation to look at. Within all of my previous roles and companies, we've all taken the latter approach of doing the more consultant kind of based implementation or onboarding. Interestingly, at Autogen, we actually do a hybrid where we do some of the configuration, and then alongside that, we do consulting too. But I think regardless of whether you have that kind of high touch or lower touch onboarding model, the most important thing is to sit down and plan out that customer journey. So right from the handover with sales to kind of the graduation from implementation and handover to account management, what does that look like? If you can break it out into phases and ask yourself, what are the things that we want our customers to be doing within a certain time frame, that helps you get that initial kind of project plan slash timeline together, and also share some of this information with the customer in the pre-sales process so they know what to expect. But at the end of the day, you should be asking yourself, like, what does a customer of ours need to be doing to ensure that they are sticky in the product, that they see value in the service that we provide, and that coming out of implementation, there is a likelihood for them to renew. So those are sort of the questions I ask as I start defining that implementation timeline.
I'm curious how you think about like what a successful implementation actually means. Is it a product milestone, customer being like, we're happy? And then like, is there a metric too that you're tracking, like time to implementation? How do you think about sort of like an implementation program and whether it's actually working or not?
It's such a good question. And I think it's a really difficult one for a lot of companies to get right. Like they know that they need to have an implementation journey and that customers need to go through implementation. But how you track the value you're driving and the effectiveness of that implementation is something that, like, even today, I still think about as I join each company. Um, we've taken different approaches at companies I've been at in the past. So one of the approaches that we took for one of the very first companies that I led a customer success team for was we looked at product features. And we did a lot of investigation into what features demonstrate the highest sort of stickiness effect. And then we broke our implementation out into, okay, these are the 4 top features. Are they using them? And only once they were using them did we graduate them from implementation. So that's one approach that we took. At Iterable, because we're a cross-channel platform, for us, implementation was about getting the customer at parity to what they had been doing previously. And then the second half of our implementation was, how do we take them from that kind of crawl walk parity to running with our product? So that was how we judged implementations, and we had a certain number of consulting hours that we would sell as a part of our implementation package. So a combination of consulting hours have been used, and they're not just at parity, but they're now running, was the kind of other part of our qualification requirements.
I'm curious in either the implementation or just even the ongoing relationship. I always find there's this interesting balance of like the admin persona, the person who's buying the tool, maybe setting it up, and then the actual end user. I mean, it was really distinct at like Lattice, where it was like there's the HR person who's buying it, and then all the
Yep.
employees are doing their performance reviews. In your world in marketing, maybe it's like a little more the same. Like I know you were my CSM at Autopilot. That's how we know each other, and I was both the end user and the admin. So it's funny. But yeah, I don't know. How do you think about that? Because it's something we struggle with at Doc to sort of think through what is our motion for each, because it's very different personas and what they need to know out of the product.
Definitely. And I think you have to understand that for the implementation, but also then post implementation, there are different engagement methods and levels for the account manager or the CSM. So within the implementation period, we typically identify in the kickoff call the certain kind of personas that will be engaged with throughout the onboarding. And what was really important to us at Iterable was that in that kickoff call, we had the customer identify who in their team would be against each of those personas. So we had sort of the executive sponsor, then we had the marketing lead, and we also had the tech or the data lead as well. And then occasionally, depending on the organization, we would have an operations lead. And so we identified right at the outset who they were. And then within our implementation project plan and timeline, we associated different tasks with those personas so that it was super clear who was owning what. And we sort of had some success criteria in the background to make sure that those personas were engaged. Post implementation, I think what you said at the beginning is spot on, which is, hey, sometimes there's somebody in the organization that buys a tool and then they're like, here you go, you're going to use this. And there are then other people within the organization that actually use it and are the day-to-day providers of feedback. So for us at Iterable, it was really important that we didn't lose sight of the person that was signing the contract and was the executive sponsor. But we also knew that the metrics that we shared with them, the meetings that we pulled them into, were going to be slightly different to the day-to-day users. So we worked with this really fantastic consultancy company called Corporate Visions. And one of the best things that we rolled out with them was this concept of a triple metric. So if you think about a pyramid, and then there's 3 different layers of that pyramid, the day-to-day users of your tool are at the bottom. Then you need to identify the KPIs that they're tracking and they care about. Then you do the same for kind of that mid layer of management at the company. And then at the top of the pyramid is the execs. And then we linked how the KPIs from the day-to-day users would roll up to the middle management and then up to the execs. And we made sure that during various different touch points in the customer lifecycle that we were speaking to the relevant triple metric, depending on the audience.
I love that visualization.